At the end of this video, I'm going to ask you to make some changes in your life, probably despite you not wanting to. Before doing that, I'm going to explain why you don't want to change, even if you probably should. The process of change is not intuitive. A lot of times it feels detrimental, but that is an illusion. Part 1. What is change? In the psychological literature, change is described as acquiring new knowledge, which can be achieved by either unlearning or overwriting old stuff, or by replacing our main goals and motivations with others. But strictly speaking, all change has to do with knowledge. And resistance to change can be described as how hard we're willing to fight to protect that knowledge. There are two types of knowledge. One is automated. It's procedural, latent, tacit, implicit, and it comprises 70% of our adult knowledge. The other is controlled knowledge. It's conscious, declarative, explicit, and conceptual. The thing is, all automated knowledge starts as controlled knowledge. The other thing is, most of it wasn't controlled by us. It's not a secret that a lot of our colloquially named beliefs are instilled in us. And that's fine, that's how everything operates. We are born stupid and helpless and soft and squishy. And pouring some knowledge into us makes sure that our squishy bodies and minds don't get destroyed prematurely. Where we get in trouble is when we keep guard of this knowledge, sometimes despite the evidence of the contrary being thrown in our faces. Some of this automated knowledge is really silly and really widespread and really protected. For instance, did you know that goldfish have a 3-second memory? That's why they swim around the fish bowl, because the poor things keep forgetting what the room on the other side of the bowl looks like, and they have to remind themselves over and over again. Well, turns out that is bullshit. In reality, goldfish have a pretty good memory and can be trained to perform tasks. This rumor, that's what it basically is, started with she based this myth on her own experience as a freak person, and without considering that the goldfish stuck in a small bowl their entire lives might just have the same experience as being stuck in a bathroom stall her entire life. But isn't the authority that instilled this knowledge in us. She just proposed it as a silly remark. I've been saying Rihanna this whole time, because we don't know who started the myth that the goldfish have 3-second recall. Thanks, Rihanna. It's the larger society repeating this silly lie that instilled it in my generation at least, by repeating over and over and over again until it became solid. I had one person say this to me as if it was like a revelation, said for the first time ever. And when I pointed out that goldfish actually really fucking depressed and exhibiting repetitive motion because this is all they can do, he called me exhausting and asked me why I'm like this. Fair point actually, but excuse me sir, at least I'm not spreading propaganda about fucking goldfish. He lashed out on me because I challenged his belief in a way that's hard to ignore. And if that's his response to a challenge of belief this small and inconsequential, then imagine if I challenged one of his beliefs that he held so tightly that it was part of his identity. From this visceral reaction, I think it's clear, change actually hurts. Part 2. Change actually hurts. In 1981, Ronald Short wrote an opinion article proposing that the demand to change triggers the process of grieving in us. Can you imagine being asked to change if it felt like death of our beliefs? Isn't this just a little too dramatic? But we can't deny that it triggers some very strong emotions. I've been quite fired in the past for not adjusting to a change in work policy. I used to be very resistant to change. I did learn how to do it eventually, and since then I quit most of my addictions. Smoking, drinking, self-hate. The point is, when change is forced on us, we find it very hard. The decision to change, or even to comply with the changes being forced on us, must come from us. In other words, we need motivation to change. and it better be a good one. Part 3. How does one actually change something in their life? I'm trying to look like a poet. Did you know I used to write poetry? I was good at it too. In art school, my poetry teacher, God, this sounds pretentious already. She said I have a talent for poetic rhythm. Maybe I should start writing poetry again. Maybe I should make it my New Year's resolution. The trans-theoretical model proposes that change has 5 stages: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. The first 2 imply that we have to consciously decide that we want or need to change. Without this step, change is damn near impossible. We weren't necessarily conscious during the implantation of a belief in our minds, but we sure need to be conscious to break it. The contemplation stage is when we have to debunk the excuses that prevent us from changing up until this moment. The next step is learning new information and applying it. Then all you have to do is keep on keeping on. Steps 4 and 5 are generally pretty easy. What isn't easy and what it all comes down to is motivation for change. If it's strong, the change will go smoothly. But if you don't have that motivation, if, for instance, the society around you, wide or insular, holds the same beliefs as you, if you aren't usually exposed to the darker sides of your beliefs, if you are not yourself on the darker side of those beliefs, well, those who are on the dark side of your beliefs are, frankly, fucked. What prevents us from being motivated to change is a complex of things, including but not limited to: Number 1, automated knowledge, meaning habit. Number 2, lack of knowledge, which keeps us ignorant to the reasons we need to change. Number 3, subversion of knowledge, which we're all inundated with 24/7, also known as alternative facts or undermining of establishments who produce knowledge, and the general vibe of trusting the person who talks with the most confidence and not the group of people who've been collecting and studying this knowledge. Number 4, diffusion of responsibility. It's basically when we say, well, others do it too, or it's socially or culturally accepted, and often we hold other cultures and societies to a higher standard than our own, which bring us to the main issue. Number 5, our perception of ourselves is that we are good people and that the world around us is just, and we are more likely to bend reality to keep it that way than to actually change in order to remain good people in our minds. Bro, all this time? Fucking nah. Had my hair weird this entire time. And that's because change is hard, yo. And I don't mean this in a...
That must be super fucking hard for you.
Way. No, I mean that it's actually hard. Although change being hard is circular. We avoid changing because we refuse to go through the intellectual and emotional work to reject the copes and excuses that keep us from changing. It's the human condition. Number 6, it's the human condition. But the thing is, once we know all this, we have a choice to make. Do we embrace the human condition, keeping us from making changes in our lives and collectively to the world? Because remember, diffusion of responsibility only works when most of us don't change. Or do we get over ourselves? Remember that we are not slaves to the human trait and rise above it all. Do the hard thing, which is almost immediately becomes easy, and fucking change. It seems to all come down to motivation, but that's not where it starts. The first process of change is pre-contemplation, but that's not where it starts either. It starts with lack of knowledge. Part 4. The times before motivation. There will be no hair continuity in this one. We can't predict whether change will happen from before the process. If you don't recognize there is a problem, you haven't entered the process of change to fix that problem. You are in another process altogether. On the other hand, even entering the process of change doesn't imply that we will change. The first stage is pre-contemplation, also known as the stage of resistance to change. Before we can move towards change, we need to recognize that we are problematic. And sometimes that's hard to do. Sometimes the problem doesn't feel like it's our problem. As I mentioned before, if we are not on the dark side of that issue, it's harder to connect to it, harder to empathize, and harder still to give up our habits, our knowledge, our beliefs for something that doesn't seem to apply to us. In those cases, motivation escapes us. At the beginning of this video, I implied that our resistance to change is an illusion. What I meant by this is that the thing that prevents us from changing is generally in our hands and no one else. I also said I'm going to ask you to change some things in your life. I of course can't force you to change. I don't have the authority over you in that way. All I can do is make a plea as to why I think you should change and propose motivation. Here it goes. I think you should become vegan. I realize that you are not on the dark side of animal agriculture, at least not to a graspable degree. You are on the beneficiary side, so the motivation can't be about you. It has to be about the animals who are undeniable victims of animal agriculture. You weren't conscious when it was instilled in you that these creatures are mere resources to exploit. They aren't that though, are they? Not actually. This doesn't feel like your problem, but it shouldn't be their problem either. But listen, you're gonna have to do the emotional and intellectual work to unlearn this knowledge. I hope you do. I hope you go through the things that prevent you from changing your stance on animal exploitation. And I hope you do it honestly.